How's it going? All right. Nicole, how are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm wonderful, wonderful. So happy to be here at Next.
Yes, me too.
Yeah, let's talk about tips and tricks on becoming an elite DevOps organization.
Sounds good to me.
All right, let's do it.
I mean, but like elite DevOps organization?
What does that even mean?
I don't know.
We'll get to that in a minute. First, we want to remind you that your feedback is really greatly appreciated. We appreciate first that you're here and listening to the content that we're sharing. Maybe it's spurning some questions that you have in your mind. How can you apply what we're about to talk about to your own organization? But also, we would be really grateful if you share feedback on the talk itself. So the surveys will open up in 20 minutes, but in 20 minutes' time, you're going to forget that we mentioned this because you're going to be learning about becoming an elite DevOps performance organization.
We're so exciting.
Yes.
So we'll remind you again at the end.
Yeah, good. That's a good plan.
Yeah,
good plan.
okay.
All right, so first, hello. My name is Nathen Harvey. I am a developer advocate working for Google Cloud. The place where I focus is on the DevOps and SRE community. So I love to come out to your teams and understand how are you doing DevOps within your organization? How can we help you? How can you take those DevOps and SRE practices and principles and apply them to what you're doing on Google Cloud and throughout your organization?
And I'm Nikole Forsgren. I have been a sysadmin. I've been a developer for a really long time.
A minute.
For a minute. And then I've been doing research for about a decade. If anyone here has heard of the State of DevOps report or the book Accelerate, yay, all my people. Okay, so that's me. I've been leading that research and those investigations for the State of DevOps report for 6 years and the related research for over a decade now. So speaking of, if anyone wants to check that out, it's at cloud.google.com/DevOps. So that's that research. And when we were talking about elite performers, we dig into that in the research. So the report has always focused on 4 key metrics and being able to develop and deliver software with speed and stability and how that enables us to deliver value. And it's interesting because it's not just our research that talks about that. Other researchers have been finding it too. So Eric Brynjolfsson at MIT, James Besson out of Boston University. And for the last few years, others across the industry have been using these 4 key metrics, speed and stability, to track software delivery and even technology transformations or DevOps or whatever word you want to use in your organization, find and replace, right? Digital transformation, to see how well their organizations are doing. So these 4 key metrics, I keep saying speed and stability, this is how we track them. So it's lead time, how long it takes to get from code commit to code running in production.
Sorry, so when you said code commit, that's committed where?
Code commit, the first time you commit your code. So it's not just like...
We commit to the idea of code.
No, actually, I love that question. The reason we talk about code commit, like code committed into version control, is because that's where, so code commit to code running in production, that's the most predictable part of the code process. This is the part that's most predictable. This is the part that we can really squeeze the most efficiencies out of. This is the part that's very highly automatable, right? If we back that up and talk about ideation and the other things that we can think about, right? So it's like the first idea,
right.
The first time we talk to customers.
Product market fit, which features are we going to build?
Still super important. However, that's kind of an R&D process, right? I expect this to be highly variable. So I still want to measure it, but I want to measure it very, very differently. And so still important, but it's just different. Okay, so that's not the same thing.
Right, so it's the code. I've written the code. I've committed it to the repository.
Yep.
Timer starts.
Timer starts.
And when does that timer end, just so I'm clear?
When it hits production.
Okay.
Or some will say like a pre-prod environment. So if I'm developing an app, I'm building an app, I'm putting it into the App Store, the App Store isn't going to let me push code every minute or every hour. Also, as an end user, I'm going to be real pissed if you make me update all the time. So if I have like a pre-prod environment and I just push that once a month, that's fine. Okay, that's acceptable.
Okay. The next one is deployment frequency.
Deployment frequency. How often do I push code? Those two are going to be highly correlated, right? Those are pretty similar. Now, those are my speed metrics. My stability metrics are change fail rate when I do push code.
Yeah, so this is when I push code to production and then expletive, right?
Related.
Okay.
So it's not just if it comes all the way down, it's if it requires any kind of attention.
Right. Get a human involved.
Get a human involved.
Yes.
Right? Do I have to patch it? Do I have to pay attention to it? Do I have to give it some love? And then, when you do expletive, how long does it take to get it back up? Now, in the best case scenario, that lead time and that time to restore service are going to be very, very similar. Because in the highest performing teams, their regular change process and their emergency change process are almost the same. In the lowest performers, we see them differ a lot because sometimes in emergency we skip tests because you just have to push that change out because we have to react to an emergency. However, in emergencies, we probably don't want to be skipping tests.
So there's an emergency, I skip the tests, I push to production. That's never caused anything to get worse.
I'm sure it's fine. I'm
Probably
sure it's fine.
Yes.
Now, these are our 4 key metrics. I will note that last year in 2018's report and this year in 2019's report, we also talk about service availability. We found that service availability is a better predictor of organizational performance, things like profitability, productivity, market share, effectiveness, efficiency, customer satisfaction.
Right.
So what's availability? It's making and keeping promises to our customers. So this makes sense, right? So sometimes the joke is day 1 is short, day 2 is long. So it's how well we can keep our services up.
Yeah.
Okay. So, Skippy with the clicker, sorry. So some of the key findings that we have. One is that the industry continues to improve, particularly among elite performers. So people keep asking me, is this DevOps thing still a thing?
Yeah, are we done? We've been talking about DevOps for 10 years, and frankly, Nicole, I've been doing DevOps since before there was a word for it.
Hipster, right? It's been around forever. Is this real? Or sometimes, like when I go to enterprises and talk to executives, they're like, is this a safe investment? Is this real? Can I still do this thing? Do y'all ever hear this? Like, is this real? Can I actually put money into this? It's real. Analysts have been saying that DevOps has crossed the chasm for a while now. So this is what we found. When we looked at the 2018 report, there in gray, elite performers were 7% of our population. They were a subset of that 48% of high performers. This year, the elite performers broke out into their very own group, and they almost tripled. Now they're 20%. Now, the low performers shrunk. They went from 15% down to 12%. Now take a look at that medium performance group. It got bigger. Some were from low performers getting better. Some were from high performers falling. Because remember, that high performance group used to be high plus elite.
So
why?
Well, I think I know why. Because I set out to do the DevOps, and I made it. I've done the DevOps, and so now I can sit back and relax, right?
Yes. So some is from people who've decided they have arrived, they are a DevOps, they are done, and they stop getting better. And then the world keeps moving on, the world progresses. Another is because organizations struggle with complexity, and they don't adapt, they don't get better.
Right.
So that absolutely happens. So the interesting thing is that this analysis confirms what many other analysts have said, right? So DevOps has crossed the chasm.
Great. So, you know, this word DevOps has been around for a long time. You say it's here to stay, but what exactly do we mean when we say the word DevOps? Let's see. I bet in this room we could come up with roughly 350 definitions of the word DevOps. What do you think?
At least.
At least. Easily. And the truth is, DevOps is very different depending on where you work, the teams that you're working on, and the things that you're trying to accomplish. But at the end of the day, we provide this one definition, or sort of a framework for it. It's a cultural and technical movement that's focused on delivering value by by simultaneously improving velocity and stability. And DevOps really encourages cross-team collaboration, shared incentives and responsibilities, and an environment that celebrates learning.
I like it.
It's pretty good. So, we also, in this report, found that delivering software quickly, reliably, and safely is at the heart of a technology transformation. And it's at the heart of organizational performance. So it is definitely true, we're all becoming technology organizations. We're all technology-based companies. And so getting better at delivering software safe and fast is important to how we work.
Yep, absolutely.
And so when we look at this report, Nicole, you talked about the 4 metrics, but you kind of boiled them up into 2 top-level things. We have speed on one hand and stability on the other. And so I face this all the time with people that I'm working with, and in fact, organizations I've worked in before. What should we do? We have to decide, do we want to be fast or do we want to be stable? And that's what your research bears out, right? Fast or stable?
I love that you mentioned this because for years there was kind of this like rumor that was whispered in dark alleys, right? Like you had to have one or the other, but we actually don't see trade-offs. For 6 years in a row, we see that speed and stability go together. And many times I say that, people think that that only means that they go together at the top end. Speed and stability are only things that elite performers get together. Speed and stability also happen together at the low end. So like low performers suck at all of it together. So what that means is that when we make smart investments in technology and process and cultural capabilities and metrics and monitoring capabilities, it drives performance along both speed and stability. They enable each other. They move in tandem, and the statistical analysis shows us this. And I'll say that we do this analysis completely independently. We start over every single year just to make sure, like, I'm not missing trends. So when I compare the highest performers, these elite performers, and low performers, this is what we see. We see 208 times more frequent code deployments, 106 times faster lead time from commit to deploy, over 2,600 times faster recovery from incidents, and 7 times lower change fail rate. And I think that paints a really compelling story in terms of what it enables us to do, because we are technology organizations now.
That's true, but I can also take this right to the CEO and talk about these metrics.
Exactly. And sometimes when we talk about these metrics to our CEOs or our CIOs or our CISOs, we can say, you know, it's about delivering features, but it's also about patching our infrastructure. It's about turning over, you know, patches and IP.
Right.
Because that makes it harder for us to hack. It's about keeping up with compliance and regulatory changes. It really is this holistic picture for what our organization can do. And you know, if we want to do these amazing ML and AI plays for our companies, we have to be able to deliver them. And that's what this enables for organizations. So, you know, again, for bonus points, we have availability. And again, it's about making whatever it is that we build available and accessible to our customers in reliable ways. And it's about delivering and also about how well teams are able to measure and capture availability targets and then learn from outages. So again, it's kind of this holistic picture of availability.
Yeah, and this is where we also start to get into some of the overlaps between DevOps and SRE and how they actually work together. And so we can look at some of the SRE practices that we have within Google that we've really started to share with the rest of the industry, and hopefully you're starting to pick up some of these practices as well. Of course, we have the Fifth Nine Lounge where you can go and talk and learn more about SRE, but at a very high level, SRE helps us to measure the availability of our services. And when we take an SRE approach to this, there's a couple of things that are important to keep in mind. The first thing that's important to keep in mind is that we want to take an approach to measuring our availability from a customer's point of view. I know in my career, I've been woken up many times because a CPU load was spiking, and no customer cared. No customers cared about that at all. So the SRE practice really has us looking at what are those critical user journeys that our customers are on, and how do we put accurate and responsible metrics around those. So we start with a service level indicator, and it's exactly what it says. It's a level of service that we're providing to our customers. What are those indicators? Let's start measuring those. Once we understand what those are, we then set service level objectives. So we have a metric, let's set a target for that metric. And then the other S word that you maybe have heard of before is the SLA, the service level agreement. Now, typically, this is a business agreement that your company has with some of the businesses that it might do work for. And I don't know anything about your business, but I am pretty certain that your business is not in the business of paying your customers. And that is usually the result of missing your SLA. You're giving refunds back to your customers. As a technologist, I want to stay as far away from that as possible. I do not want to be responsible for giving money to our customers, and I want to make sure that we're giving them the best experience that we can to meet our service level objectives, which are tighter than our service level agreements.
Yep, absolutely. So I like this one.
Yeah, for the first time, you see that industry matters. So you've been doing this research for 6 years plus, and this year, industry matters. Well, I'm going to just make some guesses here, Nicole. Financial services and government. Look, these are highly regulated industries. Clearly, that's going to have an impact on performance, and they're going to stand out in the research.
You sound like all the people sliding into my DMs all the time saying, like, help me tell my story because we're highly regulated, and there's no way that all of your research says that high performance is possible. And I love that guess, but the industry that was statistically significantly different is retail.
Huh. Retail? I wouldn't have thought that retail would be slower.
Retail isn't slower. Retail has higher performance, and it's the only one that's different. Technology isn't different.
Really?
Better or worse. And none of the other industries are different either. Now, this only shows 5. We actually tested about a dozen industries that just made the slide look super messy.
So how does retail get it right? Like, what are they doing within retail that helps them become elite performers?
Here's the thing that's super interesting. I love that you asked that, because if we think back over the last decade or so, there's a trend that's been happening that people have called the retail apocalypse. It has been so unbelievably cutthroat to be a retailer. It's so competitive that if you can't keep up, you are out of business. So many retailers have been shuttering. Is this sounding familiar at all? Right? So what retailers have had to do is embrace cutting-edge technology. They have to do A/B testing to understand customer behavior. They have almost no margins, so they have to automate to embrace efficiency, and also have consistent, repeatable, auditable processes. They have to also be in the cloud to cope with huge swings in demand. So in the US, we have Black Friday. It's the day after our Thanksgiving.
Yes.
When everyone swarms the internet and buys, we do all of our Christmas shopping in basically 24 hours. There is no question of if you're in the cloud. It's like, of course you're in the cloud.
Yes.
And then everyone says, oh, we're highly regulated. Retailers have to process credit card transactions. Of course they're regulated.
Yeah. What's our next finding, Nicole?
Okay. The best strategies for scaling DevOps focus on structural solutions that build community. So often I get questions saying, okay, but how do I scale? I'm in a large enterprise. I'm not in this cute little tiny startup. I have to make the DevOps work with more than 5 or 10 people.
Right.
So we did this analysis this year. And here's what we found. We have to have community structures, because this makes your DevOps investments and practices resilient to things like product changes or reorgs. I don't know about you, but like big companies I think they like reorgs more than they like money. They love reorgs. So things like communities of practice, right? Because these are resilient, although these also still require resources. Grassroots efforts, right? DevOps.
It started at the grassroots,
It
right?
started at grassroots.
It's grown up from there.
Yeah.
I also love this idea of communities of practice. I see so many large organizations that build these centers of excellence. And I really feel bad about those centers of excellence. Imagine if your organization has a center of excellence, but you're not part of it. Where do you sit? You're over here in the lake of mediocrity. You're not in the center of excellence. No, that's terrible. Also, the center of excellence, we tend to look to the center of excellence to pass down the excellence from on high. They sit in this little ivory tower figuring out what is excellence and how do you do it, and they push things along. Whereas a community of practice is very inclusive. Everyone can be part of this community. We are truly going to figure out what works best, not by talking about it, not by reading a paper, but by going and doing the work so that we can figure out what works best in our organization and then use our grassroots to help spread that throughout the organization.
Which makes it more efficient. I mean, has anyone here heard the term, which is almost a cliche by now, breaking down silos?
Yeah.
No, who here hates just raising their hand? Love you all. So the challenge is that by creating a center of excellence, did we just make one more silo?
It's true too.
Kind of,
Yeah.
right? So the challenge is that you've created one more silo, which then many times makes it harder to disseminate the knowledge that even if you have experts, it makes it so hard to get all of that information out.
Right. And now we have research that even backs this up, and it shows exactly what the high-performing and elite performers are doing that are helping them to stand out as they spread these practices throughout their organization.
Yep. So we also see that proof of concept as a template and proof of concept as a seed ends up being a great strategy. So what's the difference between those two?
Yeah.
Proof of concept as a template is where you have like little tiger teams building out POCs, and then you kind of stamp them out, right? So you end up replicating them out. POC as a seed is you have that POC team, and then you kind of break up that team and embed them in other teams. So there are a few different ways to kind of do that, and we've seen that work several different places. We wondered if there were differences. There aren't. There could be cultural preferences depending on your organization.
Sure.
And I'm sure you've seen that
Absolutely.
at different places.
Absolutely.
So what works and what doesn't, as we just mentioned, communities of practice, bottom-up or grassroots. Training centers are also called dojos, a few places.
Yeah, and those, we find that they don't have consistent results, right?
Right. Some of them can work really well. The challenge, again, is that you may have inadvertently created another separate group and separate silo. They can be impactful. We see them in the highest performers, so high and elite performers, but we only see them show up about 9% of the time. It takes significant investment. And by investment, I mean money, training, resources, staff. Because if you do that, you have to take people out of their original work environment, build things that are meaningful and real and impactful, and then find ways to embed them back in their normal environment and still continue on all of the work that they're doing.
Yeah, so that's how we scale. And our next finding, what do we have, Nicole?
Cloud continues to be a differentiator for elite performers, and it drives high performance.
I mean, obviously, you've got to be in the cloud in order to get this stuff done.
So in theory, obviously, but I'm a researcher, so I need to test everything.
Yeah.
And it's also interesting because I trust no one, and when people say they're in the cloud, I went out and a whole bunch of people said they were using the cloud, but it didn't make a difference. Some people said, I know, shock face. This is my surprise face. Some executives said that they were making investments in the cloud and it didn't make a difference. And some developers said that they went to the cloud, but their jobs didn't change. And I'm like, but how did you go to the cloud and nothing changed?
So what does it mean to be in the cloud?
I love that question because as a researcher, I have to have a way to measure things to see what the difference is. And what we see is that ends up being the key difference, is how you actually do cloud. And then we see a huge difference. So how you actually do cloud is what matters. So there are 5 key practices to doing cloud correctly. And I didn't make this up. This actually comes from NIST, National Institute of Standards and Technology. So these are the 5. 1 is on-demand self-service.
Right? I can get it anywhere, and
Yep.
or all the time.
All the time, and self-provision. So if
Yep.
it ends up hiding behind like a ServiceNow ticket for someone to approve, you get no points. Doesn't count. Number 2, broad network access.
Not only can I launch things anytime I want or need to, I can do it basically from anywhere. If I need to, I can pull up my phone and launch a service.
Yep, exactly. 3 is resource pooling.
Right? So we get to share the resources. We know that my stuff might run on some of the same hardware as your stuff, but it's isolated. We're pulling those resources together.
Yep, exactly. My favorite, rapid elasticity.
That's right. It means we go bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger.
Bursting like magic, up
Yes.
and down.
Oh, right. We should get smaller, too.
Yep,
Yeah.
exactly.
Which is important because we have a measured service, and we care about how much money we're spending on the cloud, and we want to be able to look after that and spend the appropriate amount.
You only pay for what you use. Okay, so here's what we found. Of the respondents that said they were in the cloud, only 29% of them were doing all 5.
Wow.
And elite performers were 24 times more likely to have met all 5 characteristics of cloud computing. So that ends up being the key difference. It's kind of like DevOps, right? You can ask people if they're in their cloud, and you're going to get 5 different answers for what it means to be doing cloud computing.
Right.
It's sort of like that gym membership that you pay for, but you got to actually go to the gym. If you want to reap the benefits of cloud computing, you need to actually have processes and technologies architected to let you leverage them the right way.
And there are clear wins that you get from cloud. Not only the fast auto-scaling, you get that cost visibility that we talked about, but another great thing that you get is security.
Yes.
You have someone that is not within your organization that is looking after securing that infrastructure. Now, this does not absolve you from any security sins. You still have to care about security within your own applications and infrastructure. But depending on the services that you're using, that security may be built right into the service.
Yep, absolutely.
And of course, with Google Cloud, we offer a number of different cloud-based services that you can take full advantage of. You can do much less with your infrastructure. Give more of that to us. Let us worry about securing it.
Absolutely.
And you probably heard, but we recently GA'd Cloud Run. So if you've been containerizing your workloads and want to get to a place where you don't have to think about the infrastructure at all, with Cloud Run, you can actually give us a container and run it in a fully serverless operational environment. That means we're handling all of the underlying infrastructure, the security of that underlying infrastructure, and so forth. You need to build that container, hand it to us, we'll scale it up, we'll scale it down, we'll manage all of that for you.
And you only pay for what you use.
And you pay for
just
what
like
you
that
use.
managed service piece.
Absolutely. And we see customers all the time, including this particular research report. The Broad Institute looked into how was their cloud spend happening over time. And the more cloud resources they took advantage of, the more they were able to cut their costs significantly.
And the thing I love about this example is that they were able to adopt an iterative approach, right? So they kind of did it a step at a time and a piece at a time, which is something else I love about the cloud. So another thing that we found is that productivity and increasing productivity can actually drive improvements in work-life balance, which I really love because some of this is about performance, developing and delivering software, but some of it really is individual, right? Like some of it is about making our own lives better. And I want to be more productive, but I don't just want to burn myself into the ground. I want to make my own life better. And by improving our productivity, it can reduce burnout. And organizations can make smart improvements to help with that. So there's a lot more detail in the report. But some of this comes down to easy-to-use tools to make CI and CD better and effortless, right? So one of those is, is your tool useful? Does it actually help me do my job? Which sounds obvious. I don't know about you, but like I've had tools that don't help me very much. I just fight with that tool all the time. So having good tools, good developer tools, good IT ops tools are super important. Another one is that it's just easy to use, right? That one is super important. Another one that I love is how well it's integrated into the other things that I use. A nerd note about integrated?
Yeah?
This actually throws all the way back to my PhD and my postdoc. We find that like how well a tool is integrated to the rest is super predictive of performance for technology professionals.
Yeah, and speaking of integrated, I know, like, I like to stay in the same set of tools. I don't like to move from one IDE over to a web browser, over to this, over to that, just to get everything that I need done. And so we're making a lot of strides within Google Cloud itself to help you with that as well. So as an example, Cloud Build is integrated right into GitHub so that without actually doing anything, you can change the code in your repository, push that change to GitHub. Cloud Build can pick that up, create a new container for you, and orchestrate all of that. You don't have to change the environment that you're in. It's fully integrated into your workflow.
Nice. Love it.
Yeah, and there is a right, this is our 6th finding here from the report, there's a right way to handle change approval process, right?
Yes.
And it leads to improvements to both speed and stability. And I know, change approval process, it's all about making sure that we're safe. So I have a change control board that looks after the changes that are coming in, makes sure that they get approved. I know, because I can see the whole landscape, I know what's going to happen, and so I can be the judge of whether or not this change is safe.
Does
Correct?
anyone here have a change approval board where they work? Change approval boards are very well intentioned. The challenge is that they so often insert long delays in what it is that we do. Change approval boards and time delay, right? It's a huge thing. And the challenge is that we also know that delay, we don't know. We had heard stories that delay can be problematic, right? We know that speed and stability go together. So this year we explicitly tested it, and we actually find that heavyweight process and heavyweight change approvals actually lead to instability. And having a clear change approval process drives better performance, better speed and stability, and reduces burnout. So we do have some great tips and tricks in the report, as well as guidance about how change approval boards can help streamline their change approval process and adopt a more strategic approach.
Yeah, I think that's really important also
Yeah.
that it helps to reduce burnout. So
Yeah.
I think that when you have a clear understanding of how does this change that I've just made, how is it going to get all the way through to production? Do I have transparency into what that looks like? With a change control board, often I make my change to the code and I don't know, it goes off to the change control
It goes into the magical black box of doom.
board. Right.
We
And
don't
then
know what happens, right? But by adopting risk-based approvals, it can make things a lot better.
That's great.
Okay. But like, I keep like popping on my research hat. So what can y'all do? Like how can we apply this in what it is that we do?
I have an idea. Yeah. We can go over to cloud.google.com/DevOps. And I'm just going to do that
Demo
right now.
time.
Yeah.
Question mark
So
demo.
This section of the cloud.google.com site, it's at /DevOps, if I didn't mention that, has a lot of great resources for you. The first thing that's listed on the page right now is a video. And I don't know about you, but if you want to see Nicole on a trapeze.
They put me on a trapeze.
Yeah.
It
And
was
in a hot air
hilarious.
balloon, you can go check that
Yes.
out, all about the
But
research.
that's not the useful part,
No, that's
so
not.
skip that.
Yeah. So then you can come on here and download the State of DevOps report.
Yep, the 2019 report.
Absolutely. The thing that I'm really excited about that I want to share today, though, is this DevOps quick check. So you can go back into your organization and answer 5 quick questions to sort of assess where does your organization sit. So we're going to do that right now. I have to crowdsource the answers, so I'm going to call on a couple of people. If you get called on, please realize that whatever answer you give, this entire audience is going to come back with you to your office and audit it for truthfulness. So, sir in the white shirt right here, for the primary application that you work with, what is the lead time from the time you commit until that time that change is in production? Less than 1 hour, I have.
Ooh.
All right, less than 1 hour. Let's see that. All right, our second question, the deployment frequency, and I'm gonna do the right thing and crowdsource this from a bunch of different people, so that we get
Narrator,
a
that is
completely
not the right thing.
a false answer. Isn't that right? Isn't that how research works, Nicole? No? All right.
Normally, you would do this assessment per team because teams operate at different cadences, right?
Right. So deployment frequency, you're sitting right next to our first answer. Would you mind telling us how frequently, for your primary application, is code moving into the production environment? I'm sorry, less than 1 day. Multiple per day. Okay, great. So on demand, we'll call that multiple per day. Okay, so now we have your application. You've realized through your monitoring, through your users, that there's an outage. How long does it take to fully recover from that outage or from that incident? And your choices are more than 6 months, 1 to 6 months, 1 week to a month, 1 day to 1 week, less than 1 day, or less than 1 hour. Just someone shout out an answer for me.
Less than an hour.
All right. I think we might find some elite performers here, Nicole. What do you think?
I know.
All right. The fourth of 5 questions, your change fail percentage. So when you push code into the production environment, how often does that require manual intervention, which may or may not be preceded by an expletive? Yes? Nicole, pick someone to give us an answer here.
Sir. What's that? 0 to 15%.
0 to 15%. All right. The final question that we ask is, what is your industry? Now,
This allows us to make comparisons.
right, and this also shows us all of the industries that you've looked at through part of your research,
Yep,
right?
yep.
Which is, as you mentioned, more than were on the previous slide. Because we know retail is the one that stands out most, I'm just going to select
Let's do
retail.
it.
All right. So now, with these 5 questions answered, you can view your results. And what you can see, of course, everyone gave the best answers possible here, just about, which is great. But you can see your overall ranking across all of the research. And then, so the blue bar is where you are. The black line is where the rest of the research respondents are. And we can,
So typical industry performance.
yep, typical industry performance.
I use the word typical because that's like median. We don't use averages. Sorry, stats hat is on.
Yep. And then we can click over to your industry, to the retail side. And I just want everyone to watch. This is the magical part of the demo, or you keep your eyes on the black bars, and I'm going to click your industry. Oh, it got better. Did everybody see that? I'll just do it again in case you missed it. Watch the black bars, and it got better.
Retail gets
All
better.
right. So you can compare where do you sit not only across the entirety of the research,
Yep.
but also within your
So
specific
like, how
industry.
good are you in terms of a performer? We're about to roll out a classification, so you can see if you're a low, medium, high, or an elite performer. But then the big question remains, how do I get better? What if I come back as a lower performer or a medium performer? How do I get, or even if I'm a higher and elite performer, how do I get better?
Yeah, and so you can see exactly where you fit here. And then there's a couple of things that I also want to share with you that answer exactly that question.
Yep.
How do you get better? On this page, we also have a collection of software delivery capabilities, or DevOps capabilities, if you will. And these capabilities, you'll see, are falling across 4 different areas. So we start off with some of the technical capabilities, things like version control. Do you put all of your code and configuration into version control? If you don't, please see me afterwards. I want to have a discussion with you, and I want to teach you some Git. But there were other technical capabilities here as well, right?
Or even CI. Like, CI is one of my favorites. I will mention really quickly, these are all capabilities that we have found that are statistically significantly predictive of improving your ability to develop and deliver code with speed and stability.
Right.
Will you click on CI for me?
Will I click on CI? For you? I certainly will.
So often when I meet with customers or enterprises or clients, or like bump into someone and they'll say, oh, well, I'm doing CI. And then they'll find out that CI is something that, like in some of our DORA assessment work, CI ends up being a constraint for them. And they're super surprised. And then we'll roll through this. And like if you scroll down a little bit, you'll say, like, in order to be doing CI that is significantly predictive of performance, you need to be doing like 4 or 5 things. So some of these are really helpful to help outline, right? So common pitfalls. are you actually doing these things in bold? So these may be super helpful and kind of interesting in terms of doing a quick check, because CI is one of these like magical industry buzzwords that so many organizations have decided are a personal or like an organizational initiative, and then they'll redefine it to only cover like 2 of these things or 3 of these things,
Right.
but not all of these things.
So right here on this page, you can see all of these technical capabilities. And as you saw, we have an article that helps you take this technical capability back into your organization. You saw there, how do you fight objections to CI? What do you need to measure? But it's not just about technical capabilities. There are also process capabilities. You see here, right here, the streamlining of change approval. Again, that's research that comes directly out of the report.
Yep.
Other things like working in small batches and team experimentation.
Yep. And even cultural things, right?
Absolutely. There are
Culture's
cultural things here, like
like Westrum.
the Westrum organizational culture, right? If you've not read Ron Westrum's research, it's cool, you don't have to. You can come to this page and we'll tell you all about that research and how to implement it within your own organization.
And how it applies to technology transformation.
And how it helps. And you should totally read Ron Westrum's actual
It's
research
dope.
as well. It's really good. There's also measurement here as well.
Yes.
Can't forget measurement.
Metrics and
So we have a couple of different capabilities there as well. So from this page, you can get not only a great assessment of sort of where do you sit as an organization or where does your team sit, but you also get insight into all of the capabilities here. And before we go back to our slides
I will
here,
say a couple more things are coming. So the 2019 report just came out. We don't have we're working on building out the deep dives into the code maintainability was in the 2019 report. It's not here yet. Stay tuned.
Another thing you can do from here is you can share the results. I find it fascinating to go into an organization and ask a team who the entire team is working on the same application. I ask them to take this quick check, and then I compare the results across the individuals of the team. I have a theory, but Nicole won't let me say that it's finalized yet because I haven't tested it well enough. But I think the higher up the organization you go, I think the rosier the picture gets.
Oh no, that's totally true. Research
is it
has
totally
shown
true?
that executives
Great.
tend to overestimate their technology capabilities by 2x.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, that
Yeah,
happens
that's real.
all the time.
Which
Yeah.
is why when the DORA assessment is live, so our assessment only collects data from dev, test, ops, QA, InfoSec, and we don't collect data from executives because
All right,
their estimates are rosy.
yes. So we definitely want you to check out cloud.google.com/DevOps. You can find this information here, all of these capabilities. But still, how do we put it to work?
So I will mention, we just showed you how to assess how well you develop and deliver, how to improve it because you've got all these capabilities. But then the next key question is, where do I start? There's this big giant list of stuff that is predictive, but it's a giant list. So oftentimes people will come and they'll say, I know, maturity model. Who here loves or whose executive/manager/boss loves maturity models? Everyone, right? Because it gives you this nice, rosy, guided path to nirvana, and it's always 5 levels. Why? Because they're made up and everyone has 5 fingers, right? It's fine. The challenge, though, is that they're not great because all teams are different, right? Like, I can't roll out one maturity model that will be the same for cloud native versus mainframes. It's
Right.
just going to be different. So what we need to do is identify your constraint. Take a look at those capabilities and think, what's my biggest headache? What's holding me back the most? That's the rough version. You can also take very formal versions of it, like value stream mapping. That will be a process-based constraint approach. Or the DORA assessment takes a capabilities-based approach. But you can sit down with your teams and just say, of these capabilities, what's our biggest problem? What slows us down the most? What do we swear at the most? Mm-hmm. Start there. Because that will allow you to accelerate your transformation. You're removing the roadblocks. So focus there. Dedicate resources, which is either money or time or focus or attention. Once that is no longer your constraint, identify your next constraint. sometimes that makes executives or bosses a little bit nervous because you haven't given them a 3 to 5 year roadmap. But what you have done is built them a customized roadmap with a 6-month to year-long time frame, and you're then training everyone. You're building institutional muscle on how to build your own roadmap. Everyone is now the experts in how to build a roadmap, how to identify constraints, how to think strategically. And you'll get better exponentially faster. And it works for anyone, whether they're at the very top end of the spectrum and they're already elite performers, or they're early on and they're just getting started.
Right, and think back to those high performers from last year that maybe are medium performers now. Potentially, the reason that they're now medium performers is because they stopped iterating. They stopped that practice of continuous improvement. So it is truly a continuous improvement and continuous learning journey that we're on.
Yep. And we have more details in the 2019 report about how to do this, including tips about how to attack this from multiple areas in the organization. There are some things that you can do at the management level and things you can do at the team level for even more optimal performance.
Yep. So please do go download the report, cloud.google.com/DevOps. Give that report to everyone in your organization. It is full of great information for any level within your organization. CEOs have read this.
Yep.
Sysadmins that we keep in the dark and in the data center have read this.
No.
No?
I used to work in that dusty corner.
Yeah, I know. It's not very fun down there, is it? Yes.
Awesome.
With that, we would like to thank you and remind you to please provide us some feedback on the talk and the things that you're learning today throughout the application. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much for joining us.